Imagine waking in the middle of the night. The air feels unusually heavy, still, pressurized. Outside your window, the wind shifts, and then you hear it. A long, rising wail that doesn't quite sound human, but doesn't sound like any animal you know either. It isn't a scream of rage. It isn't a cry for help. It sounds like grief. In Irish folklore, that sound has a name, the Banshee. And according to Celtic mythology, if you hear her cry, someone close to you will soon die. But who or what is the Banshee really? Is she a ghost, a fairy, a death spirit, or something far older and more symbolic within ancient Irish belief? Tonight, we're diving deep into the Irish legend of the Banshee, her origins, her meaning, her connection to Celtic death rituals, and why her scream has echoed through centuries of history. The meaning of the word Banshee. The word Banshee comes from the Irish Gaelic term Bean Sidhe, meaning woman of the fairy mound or woman of the otherworld. In Celtic mythology, the Sidhe were supernatural beings connected to burial mounds, ancient hills, and the hidden spirit realm known as the Otherworld. The Otherworld in Celtic belief was not a hell nor a place of punishment. It was a parallel spiritual realm, timeless, beautiful, and deeply intertwined with the world of the living. The boundary between these two realms was believed to be thin, especially at night, especially near ancient burial sites, especially during sacred seasonal festivals like Samhain, when spirits were said to move more freely between worlds. The Banshee was not considered a demon. She was part of this spiritual ecosystem, a messenger between realms. What does the Banshee do? One of the most misunderstood parts of the Banshee explained is this: the Banshee does not cause death, she announces it. She appears or is heard when someone in a family is about to die. In many Irish legends of the Banshee, she is tied to specific bloodlines, particularly ancient Gaelic families, often those whose surnames began with O or Mac. In these stories, each family had its own Banshee, a guardian spirit bound to their lineage. When death approached, she would manifest outside the home, sometimes visible, sometimes invisible, but almost always heard. Her cry, known as keening, was described as a piercing wail layered with sorrow so deep it felt inhuman. This is where the term Banshee scream meaning becomes important. Her scream was not aggression, it was mourning. She was grieving before the family even knew loss had arrived. How is the Celtic death spirit described? Descriptions of the Celtic death spirit vary across regions and centuries. In some accounts, she appears as a young woman with impossibly long silver hair flowing in the wind. In others, she is an ancient crone, pale, gaunt, with red-rimmed eyes from endless crying. She may wear a gray cloak, a white burial shroud, a green dress associated with fairy lore, or black, the universal color of mourning. Sometimes she is seen combing her long hair, sometimes sitting silently on a stone, and in one of the most chilling forms of the Irish death omen, she appears as the washer at the ford. The washer at the ford. In this variation of the Banshee myth, she is seen near a river or stream, washing blood-stained clothes in moonlight. If someone approaches and recognizes the garments, they belong to the person who is about to die. In certain legends, if you speak to her first, she must answer your questions truthfully, but if she speaks to you first, your fate is sealed. The washer at the ford connects deeply to ancient Celtic symbolism. Water represented transition, rivers marked boundaries. Crossing water often symbolized crossing into another state of being, so the banshee washing clothes in water becomes more than a haunting image, it becomes ritualistic. She is preparing a soul for departure. The Celtic view of death. To truly understand the Irish legend of the Banshee, we must understand the Celtic worldview. For the ancient Celts, death was not an end, it was a passage, a continuation. They believed the soul traveled to the otherworld, a realm of beauty and timeless existence. This perspective changed everything. Death was not something to be denied, it was acknowledged, prepared for, and ritually honored. This is why the Banshee was not seen as evil. She was part of the sacred transition. In fact, her role may reflect ancient mourning traditions known as keening. Keening, the human origin of the Banshee. In traditional Irish funerals, women known as keeners would wail and sing laments for the deceased. These cries were emotional, haunting, and powerful. They were not random screams. They were structured, ritualistic expressions of grief. Over centuries, as pagan Celtic practices merged with Christian Ireland, it's possible the keening woman evolved into something supernatural. The ritual mourner became a spirit. The sound of grief became a death omen. And the memory of communal mourning transformed into the solitary figure of the Banshee. This theory connects folklore with cultural anthropology, but it doesn't fully explain the consistency of Banshee accounts. Historical records and family testimonies. Unlike many mythological figures, the Banshee appears in documented accounts from the 15th century onward. There are references to spectral women crying before the deaths of Irish nobles. Family histories from the 17th and 18th centuries describe identical experiences. A wail outside the home, dogs howling in response, a cold wind despite closed windows, and within days, death. What makes these stories more unsettling is repetition. Families claimed the same sound across generations. Irish immigrants in America even reported hearing the Banshee after crossing the Atlantic. If this was purely superstition, why did the legend travel so strongly with bloodlines? Why did descriptions remain consistent before mass media existed? These questions keep the myth alive. Natural explanations. Could the Banshee be misidentified sounds? Modern skeptics often suggest animal cries as the source of the Banshee scream. Foxes, barn owls, and certain wildcats produce sounds eerily similar to human wailing. In rural Ireland, where darkness was absolute and death common, it's easy to imagine how such sounds could take on supernatural meaning. Psychology also plays a role. When someone elderly or ill is near death, families experience anticipatory grief. Anxiety heightens sensitivity. The mind fills in patterns. A strange sound becomes an omen. Yet, even with these explanations, something lingers. Because many Banshee stories describe multiple people hearing the cry simultaneously, not one, several. Shared hallucinations are rare. Shared expectations are powerful. But shared sensory experiences are harder to dismiss. The symbolism of the Banshee. Beyond literal belief, the Banshee represents something universal. Every culture has a death messenger, an omen, a sign. In Celtic mythology, the Banshee embodies the emotional weight of loss before it arrives. She represents the inevitability of mortality, the sacredness of grief, the thin veil between worlds, and the ancestral connection to lineage. Her presence reminds us that death is not sudden in spirit, even if it feels sudden in life. There is often a shift before loss, a quiet, a feeling. In Irish folklore, that feeling has a voice. The Banshee in modern culture. Today, the Banshee appears in horror films, fantasy novels, television series, and video games. But modern portrayals often distort her. She is reimagined as violent, as monstrous, as a creature that kills. This is not how she appears in traditional Irish legend. In ancient Celtic mythology, the Banshee was mournful, almost compassionate. She did not celebrate death, she wept for it. This nuance is often lost in modern horror adaptations, yet understanding it makes the legend more haunting, not less, because she is not chaos, she is inevitability. Why the Banshee legend survives. The endurance of the Banshee myth explained through psychology, history, and spirituality reveals something powerful. We fear death, but more than death itself, we fear the anticipation of it, the waiting, the moment before the news, the silence before the phone call. The Banshee personifies that space, that emotional threshold. She gives shape to something invisible, and perhaps that is why her legend survives centuries after ancient Celtic tribes carved spirals into stone and buried their dead beneath green hills. The Banshee is not just an Irish folklore figure, she is a metaphor for grief, for lineage, for the fragile boundary between life and whatever comes after. Final reflection. So, if you ever find yourself awake in the middle of the night, and the wind carries something that sounds almost like crying, you might tell yourself it's an animal. You might tell yourself it's imagination, and maybe it is. But in the old hills of Ireland, where ancient burial mounds still rise from the earth, they would say something different. They would say the Banshee does not scream without reason, and if she cries, it means someone is about to cross into the other world.